You see, all our people are businessmen. Their loyalty is based on that. One thing I learned from Pop was to try to think as people around you think. Now, on that basis, anything's possible.
The Godfather movie trilogy is known as one of the most iconic sets of films worldwide. There are various plot twists and turns with a wide range of lessons for us to learn, and always with this channel, it is about learning from all things, taking those lessons and implementing them into our lives for the better. As the wise man learns from everything and everyone, whereas the fool has all the answers. Michael Corleone undergoes a compelling transformation from an innocent war veteran to a formidable crime boss. While the character's actions and choices may not be morally upright, there are certain traits that men especially can learn from Michael Corleone and implement in their daily lives.
It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.
Michael was merely a student and then an army member who had no involvement with his family's activities, which included crime, but was still aware. Why it is important for us to learn from Michael is because of how he transformed himself from an innocent member of the family to becoming the ruler of the family, which they refer to as the Don, using the intelligence and wisdom that he gained from his father, Vito Corleone. He had the striking balance of being reserved and calm to ruthless and cold when required, which is important to implement as a man in society today. Let's break down the 3 traits that we can learn and implement from Michael Corleone. Intelligent and strategic. Michael Corleone is not just intelligent, he is also a master strategist, always thinking several moves ahead. He is known for considering all possibilities and their potential consequences before making a decision. These are 2 complementary traits that you should look to install in your armor, as this is one of the differences in getting further than your competition or your enemies. See, I'm sure we are all aware of why it is important to become intelligent, as this is something that will help us in our daily lives and make well-informed decisions from day to day. However, when you mix this with being strategic, this brings a whole different dimension to one's character. Because most people are short-sighted, that is, they don't think long-term, but instead think of immediate pleasures when making decisions, they often lack the clarity needed to make better decisions that will benefit them more in the long term. On top of this, they lose daily battles against themselves and others because they lack the capacity to plan things out methodically. It is important to ensure you don't lack the ability to strategize when dealing with the outside world, as you don't know the intentions of everyone else and not just blindly make decisions, as this is unwise. Michael is always showing his ability to strategize throughout the movies, displaying his intelligence. In fact, Michael is a man of few words, and more often than not, it is his actions, through his decision-making, that do his talking. He perfectly uses Law 9 in the 48 Laws of Power, which is, win through actions, never through argument. A perfect example of how Michael uses this law is in the first movie, when he comes up with the plan to kill Sollozzo and the policeman who punched him in the face, McCluskey. Because at this point in the movie he wasn't established yet. His brothers, along with the rest of the family, were quite surprised by his willingness to be involved in getting revenge for his father after being shot. Due to not being involved in the criminal aspects with his family, they almost brushed off his idea. But he was able to get them to follow it due to his high levels of intelligence. This is why it is a good trait to develop, as people will be more willing to listen to and follow your ideas in life. They not only followed his plan, but he himself executed it perfectly by being the one who killed both Sollozzo and McCluskey, which was something his brothers especially didn't believe he was capable of doing. This scene in the movie was very powerful, as it perfectly showed how Michael was able to win through not only his words but his actions, which are more important in regards to power, and made his family start to believe in his capabilities. As a man especially, talk is very cheap, and after a while of talking with nothing to back up what you say, your words become frivolous to everyone, and even when you are right, your words can stir up resentment towards you because, although on the surface people may agree, internally they do not, as no one likes to lose an argument, so they may be offended by your words. However, winning through actions is far more powerful, especially when proving people wrong and has a longer-lasting effect on those around you. People believe what they see more than what they hear. When winning through action, The evidence is there and cannot be contested or misrepresented. Michael always demonstrates his intelligence and strategic thinking through his actions, meaning his decisions are always followed by those around him because his previous ones were always right. This was such the case that even when he would speak, he would be listened to without much disagreement because of how powerful his actions turned out to be. He was easy to follow as the Don of the family because most, if not all, of his decisions were the right ones. So he could never be questioned whenever he had any plans, and this stemmed from his strategic thinking, which goes way back to when he came up with the plan to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey. These actions are what demonstrated his strategic thinking and showed why his actions led others to see his intelligence as opposed to just telling them about intelligence. This is the power of winning through actions, not arguments. In all things you do in life, there should always be a strategy behind them, as this is what will separate you from the person who is just merely intelligent. And part of strategy is winning battles against others through the actions of your strategies, not just words. As talk is cheap, actions speak louder. Cold, calm, and calculated. See, a very important part of life, especially masculinity, is naturally being calm and calculated, as well as knowing when to be cold. While it is important to not let being cold become the master of you, it is also important to know when to turn this trait on, especially in times when high emotions are flaring around you. One thing about Michael is that he very rarely shows signs of stress or unsettledness, even when this may be the case internally. This is a form of power, as people lose their power to others simply because they show other people that they are affected by their behaviors. Instead, one should mask their feelings to allow themselves to be in control of the situation. Once a person knows they can get under your skin, they have already won the battle. Once they can manipulate your emotions, they can manipulate you. I believe it is Michael's coldness and calmness, along with his calculated mindset, that make other people either fear him, respect him, or even both. An example of Michael's calm and calculatedness was when he realized that his father was in the hospital and was subject to being assassinated after initially being shot. When Michael realized this, he ensured that his father was moved to a different room, which was followed by him and Enzo the baker, standing outside the hospital with Michael making the plan for them to pretend to be bodyguards. As simple of a plan as this was, the plan was well executed because of Michael's efforts to remain very calm and bold. In fact, when the assassinators showed up and saw him and Enzo standing outside, pretending to have guns in their pockets, Michael looked at the assassinators dead in their eyes when they came, while Enzo was scared and struggled to light his cigarette due to the excessive shaking of his hands. Although they had nothing on them, they were able to deter them due to Michael's ability to remain calm and well poised and the boldness of his actions, as the assassinators were convinced that Michael and Enzo were carrying guns. If Michael didn't have the level of calmness as well as the calculated mind to even execute such a plan, it would have led to the assassinators killing his father, Vito. This is the power of remaining calm and well poised, even when experiencing a vast amount of emotions such as fear, anger, and frustration. Michael was definitely fearful, just like Enzo was, but he just had the ability to hide it and act with boldness at that moment and throughout the movie. He implements Law 28 in the 48 Laws of Power, which is, enter action with boldness. People tend to have a natural tendency to hesitate when acting. However, in order to be powerful, you need to overcome this tendency like Michael is able to. To do this, you must undertake all your actions with boldness and conviction. When you act with boldness, you appear more powerful even if you are not, and in fact, this intimidates people. While I'm not inciting that you purposely intimidate people, it is important to not allow people to have the belief that you are a pushover or have questions about your strength, whether that be physically or mentally. When you hesitate over your actions, people will sense that you are weak and try to take advantage of you. Hesitation also creates further obstacles for yourself, as if you act half-heartedly, you will be like the hunted rabbit that behaves erratically, eventually stumbling into the path of the hunter. One must be calm and calculated, performing all actions with boldness, as this erases doubt in your mind. And when you aspire doubt in yourself, you inspire doubt in others towards yourself. To analyze Michael's coldness, let's look at the example of when he decided to kill his brother Fredo. This was probably the most brutal moment for Michael in all of the movies, as he had to make the decision to kill his brother for his betrayal. This is an act that requires an individual to be able to have a certain level of coldness within them. Now, although this can be argued to be excessive and extreme to some extent, Michael was justified in his actions, although they were unpopular. The reason for this is because Michael was the head of the family at the time, which is a huge responsibility, and when in that position, it is very important to ensure you can eliminate as many liabilities as possible, no matter who or what they are. One single liability within your camp can cause ultimate destruction, which can wipe out everything you have worked for, and this is something Michael was aware of. He had the ability to put his logic over his emotions, something men should ensure they develop, as this is vital if one wants to be successful or powerful. Where people fail, men especially, is that they allow their emotions to override their logic, meaning they make reckless decisions or decisions that may later hurt them. It is like cutting off a person from your life because they bring a lot of chaos to you due to their actions. The person may be very close to you, or you may have a lot of memories with them, but just by deciding to remain in their space can cause serious damage to your life because of the amount of drama that the person may bring. The harsh decision in this circumstance would be to cut that person out of your life, but although this may be a harsh decision, it is probably the right one. These types of situations happen so many times throughout so many people's lives as they allow themselves to remain in situations that are hampering them, but because they are comfortable, they stay in those situations. Instead of making the logical decision, although harder initially, which is to leave that situation so that they avoid later turmoil, which can be unfixable. This is what Michael did in regards to his brother Fredo, because Fredo betrayed him by leaking his information to Hyman Roth and lying to him that he had never met Johnny Ola, when in fact he did, and because of Fredo's actions, Michael and his family were almost assassinated in his house. Because Michael had a huge empire that needed protecting at all costs, Fredo being alive was too much of a liability, as Michael couldn't trust him. So from a business point of view, Michael couldn't allow Fredo to remain alive. If Michael had listened to his sister Connie and made up with Fredo, which he initially did, although it was probably part of his plan, there would have been a high chance that Fredo could have caused even more damage to the family, which could have potentially brought an end to it. This was too much of a risk that Michael was unwilling to take, and therefore had to make the uncomfortable decision of getting Fredo killed, showing his ability to be cold when needed. Now, this example is obviously dramatic when applied to real life, and it is not to suggest that you necessarily kill someone who is a liability to you. However, the lesson here is to realize that in life you will have to make uncomfortable decisions, especially if you want to progress, and some of these decisions can be cutting people off, not engaging in certain behaviors, or adopting a different lifestyle. Whatever the case may be, it will mean making a change that initially may be difficult, but will require you to put your logic over your feelings and make that decision. When you do things like this, you may appear to be more cold in the eyes of others. However, I believe this is a good thing because it means you have what it takes to make uncomfortable decisions that others are not willing to make, putting you further ahead in life. Loyal and mindful. One of the first times you see Michael's loyalty demonstrated was when he confronted Mo Green for his treatment towards his older brother Fredo, who slapped Fredo around in public during a scene that took place in the casino. Even though Mo Green professes to Michael that it was justified as Fredo was mixing business with pleasure, Michael didn't allow it to influence his mind or be less cynical towards him for his actions. Michael was and has been well aware of Fredo's insufficiencies, hence he was overlooked by his father as the head of the family. However, this was still Michael's brother, and Michael was still loyal to him and defended him when facing Mo Green, almost like defending one of your siblings against an outsider, even though your sibling is the one who is in the wrong. This was one of the first times you see Michael displaying his loyalty and not revealing how he feels towards his brother in front of other people. In fact, Michael actually never shows up or embarrasses his brother in front of other people, even though he's aware of his inability to have any responsibilities. It was hard for Michael to deal with his brother because Fredo was older than Michael. However, Michael was the head of the family, so he had to lead his brother, which made him have a soft spot for him. Hence, he allows him to live his own life free of any meaningful responsibilities and have anything he wants. This is why he found it very hard to kill him, because he wanted to be so loyal to him despite the fact that Fredo wasn't, and initially he just made him stay away from him after his betrayal, although he later ended up making him get killed. This was one of Michael's hardest decisions, which I believe he didn't make for the pure fact that Fredo betrayed him, but rather because Fredo was just so unreliable and could have done it again even if it was by accident, which Michael couldn't afford to happen. Michael had an unwavering amount of loyalty towards the people that he loved, to the point that he couldn't let any sort of violation go unreturned towards him and his family. Some will even say that this in itself may have been a potential flaw in his character, his inability to let things go and constantly seek vengeance for any wrongdoings done to anyone close to him. I guess the one positive with Michael in regards to this is that he isn't hasty in his decision-making. So although he had the inability to let things go, he didn't make it into something where he acted irrationally or illogically, but instead planned and thought through his attacks. This is not only what saved him, but separated him from his older brother Sonny, who also constantly wanted to seek vengeance for any wrongdoings done to his family. However, Sonny acted very hastily without thinking things through, which ultimately led to his death. Michael, on the other hand, was able to patiently wait and perfectly use strategy 3 of the 33 strategies of war, which is, do not lose your presence of mind amidst the turmoil of events. Even though Michael was a very revengeful person, he always ensured that he kept his presence of mind and never acted hastily when inciting any revenge on people. You see this when he and his father conveyed the plot to kill the heads of the 5 families due to their actions towards their own, and to get a dominant position in terms of power. This was a big move that required detailed planning, as Michael, who at this point had taken over the day-to-day control of the family, couldn't allow for any mistakes to be made. He also uses the same method of patiently waiting before striking an attack on Carlo and Hyman Roth in his plot to kill them, waiting a few years to kill the former. Now, that is a long time to wait to get revenge. Even when finding out that Tessio was the traitor who tried to set up Michael to have a meeting with the Barzini family, Michael didn't let it be known that he knew Tessio was a traitor, but instead played along with Tessio, allowing him to believe that he was unaware. If he had not kept his presence of mind, he would have reacted more hastily, blowing his cover, which could have ruined him and his father's whole plan. Michael even showed his loyalty to Tessio, despite his actions, by organizing his death to be handled more cleanly than the others, due to being a capo for the family for many years. And whilst it doesn't seem significant, it actually is, because the other deaths executed to the heads of the 5 families were very brutal compared to Tessio's. Other people in that situation probably would have been less sincere, but Michael was a man of loyalty and tried to demonstrate his acts of loyalty at all times, even though it may not have been understood as much. Presence of mind is key, especially when blending it with loyalty and family values. Sometimes one's emotions can blind them if they have been hurt, leading to erratic behavior, but always keeping a presence of mind is what will deter you from costly actions that you may later regret. Both Sonny and Michael were very loyal to the people they loved, which is very important for men, especially as a man who isn't loyal is a man who can't be trusted or respected. They both did things in order to protect their family, and they both sought out vengeance for anyone who did them or the people they loved wrong. The major difference, which is what allowed Michael to live a longer life, is that Michael always kept a presence of mind, even when incited with anger compared to Sonny, and had the ability to be patient and wait for the perfect time to execute. This made him more cold and feared, which, as I stated earlier, is important to have as a trait, especially as a man. Just because a person shows their emotions externally more doesn't necessarily mean they care more than the person who is able to mask theirs. This is the mistake people tend to make, and we see this perfectly with Michael and his brother Sonny, as they were more similar than people realize. It's just that Michael had mastered the ability to control how he felt and wasn't as reactionary, but instead thought and planned things perfectly, which is important to implement in your own life. Most people who act hastily or just react instantly to situations that come their way almost always regret it. This is one of the things that comes with a deep sense of loyalty, because loyalty itself is paired with deep levels of emotion and cannot be separated. This is why when someone you love and are loyal to breaks the trust, you feel deep levels of sadness and anger, because it's impossible to be loyal to someone without having a deep emotional connection to them. The key here is to not just ensure you are loyal to those you care about, but also ensure you always have a presence of mind so that you do not become irrational in your decision-making or actions, as this can have long-term consequences that may be irreparable. These are traits that, when extracted from Michael Corleone and applied to everyday life, can prove to be valuable. By incorporating intelligent and strategic thinking, being cold, calm, and calculated when appropriate, and being loyal but mindful, we can develop our leadership skills and navigate various challenges that come our way. Even though some of Michael's character can be up for debate as to whether they are ethical in the real world, or if he is an actual true role model type figure, what can be agreed is that he has some characteristics that are definitely worth incorporating in our lives if we want to be successful. While it is essential to draw inspiration from both positive and negative role models, we should always strive to implement these traits in a morally sound and beneficial manner in our personal and professional lives. And as the quote goes, "The wise man learns from everything and everyone, while the fool has all the answers."